So just to begin, the Walls would like to acknowledge the Yugambeh people, the traditional owners of the land on which we operate, and pay our respects to their elders past and present, and all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples on the Gold Coast today. So we're coming in from Bundjalung country today in Tugun. And welcome, Fran Miller, artist, and welcome to the opening for Dandy Savage. So it's been really marvellous to kind of adapt the Walls programming in this way. And as we go through some of the content tonight, just keep in mind that we will be doing a real life book launch at some point when we can all be at the Walls again in the same space, and that will mean a hard copy book. So for the exhibition, we have a PDF of the book and a suite of images. We have Tristan Schultz with us tonight as well, who has done a really great response to Fran's show and with Fran, and we're going to show an excerpt of that tonight as well. Excuse me. So just a little bit about Fran. Fran was born in Sydney of Korean and European heritage and now lives on the Gold Coast, lives and works on the Gold Coast. She's a self-taught photographer and kicked off her career in commercial and editorial photography, which culminated in working for some international brands and publications in the surf industry. So around 2016, Fran started moving across to a more contemporary art context, and that's where we find this work today, which is super exciting. She has worked on some other art projects, namely with Bleach Festival and Horizon Festival. She's exhibited internationally in New York and is also represented in collections in Paris, Los Angeles and Sydney. She is also part of an international book that's being published that showcases her photographs and global women's surf, and that's being released in May, so keep an eye out for that. Tristan Schultz is a Gamilaroi Aboriginal and European Australian man. He works in interdisciplinary design as a strategist and also a researcher. He's also a Burleigh board rider, and he works across sustainable design, sustainable futures, and leading conversations and sort of mapping out futures within design. He also spent a good chunk of time in PNG, like Fran, developing this project. So there's a really lovely synergy there that we're going to talk a little bit more about. Fran, just to kick off, I thought it'd be great if you could introduce the project, tell us a little bit about how it started, and also, I guess, what it means to be showing with the Walls, or showing this project with the Walls.
Where to start? So many things I could say.
Pick one.
So yeah, the project started actually before the grouping of Dandy Savage as an actual like a headline project, and it was basically just from my travels for work, surfing, things like that. Sort of basically it's a coming to terms with my own existence, which is the world of art, it seems to be. But sort of really finding my own path in the world and trying to understand how I've arrived to where I am today, why I believe the things I believe, what I've been taught, what that means to me, what it doesn't mean to me, how I move forward through the world. And Dandy Savage is like an exploration of self as a Korean Australian woman, but set in Papua New Guinea.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
And I think one of the interesting things is, because you talk a lot about travel and you've travelled a lot, but your heritage in a sense wasn't travel by choice. So there's definitely like an undercurrent there that we've talked a lot about through meetings at the walls and sort of unpacking a lot of that as well. Can you comment on that?
Well, my mother immigrated to Australia in the 70s, and it's a sort of an interesting thing being able to sort of manage, it's in the news a lot actually right now, but manage this idea that someone immigrates to a country because they are of economic benefit to that country. They're not seen necessarily as an advantage in their inherent human self to the country. They're seen as an economic advantage. And that's what a lot of immigration from Asia was, how that was talked about and how that was referenced, and how the narratives and constructs around being Asian in Australia have manifested over the years. And so obviously with the pandemic today at the moment, you're starting to look at, there is a rise in a little bit of xenophobia and things like that, but it's sort of, it's just really highlighting decades of that sort of those narratives that have existed. And Dandy Savage in itself is an exploration of coming to terms as being part white, part Asian, and trying to understand, you know, like I've expressed, why I believe the things I believe and how that's been influenced as well by the world around me and those things. So, yeah.
Okay, that's great. Thanks, Fran. So keep in mind, everyone, we will open up to Q&A and feel free to drop any questions in chat as well. So, Fran, before we go across to Tristan, can you talk a bit about this trip to PNG and how that came about?
To be honest, I literally saw a picture of this one wave. It was said to be in PNG. The only way to access it was via this one boat. I saw that picture like 8 years ago, and it just ended up being an opportunity of a lifetime to sort of go on that boat, go and see that wave. But at the time, like, I wasn't necessarily planning a body of work to come out of it. I had been in Indonesia for 5 months prior to that. So a lot of these things were building in me on the topics that I've sort of been exploring. So it was, in essence, a selfish surf trip, you know, just wanting to get away, go surfing and see this place. But I mean, I have a deep curiosity to see the world around me and to see what's just going on and live that life. So
yeah, I really like that from one photograph. And I know, like, I've only surfed for a couple of years, but I've read a bit about and understood, you know, surfers growing up, and especially when print media was a big thing, and you would get magazines and they would have photos of waves in them, and you know, it's like you're traveling without going anywhere and you're just focused on that and finding that. And so that then sort of really flows into this whole project, and I guess understanding what it means to go to these places and informed by your heritage and understanding of all of that. So Tristan, it'd be great to bring you in now and I guess link in with your trip and travels to PNG, but just to talk a little bit about this really great response that you have facilitated for the show. So basically we commissioned Tristan to, in any creative way, respond to Fran's work, and he decided on a way to do this via the internet. Tristan, can you talk a little bit about that before I fumble too many more words?
Yeah, well, the restrictions were set because of coronavirus. So I've been having to do a lot of remote facilitation recently with all kinds of projects. And
Oh no.
Tristan, we accidentally muted you. Apologies.
Sorry.
There you go. I've unmuted myself.
Oh, beautiful.
I've had to do a lot of remote facilitation, so I know where the mute button is. But when I do face-to-face facilitation, I do a lot of sort of visual mapping with people for various reasons. And so recently, in the last few months, I've had to figure out how to do that remotely so that the projects can live on and the battles rage on. You know, after all, even though coronavirus is here, climate change is also still here, and colonialism is still here, and all kinds of other wicked problems rage on. So my practice is centered around dealing with a lot of those issues with people. And so mapping that out remotely has been something I've kind of rapidly tried to figure out. And that's what we did with Fran, is set up what's called a virtual whiteboard. And I dumped all of the images, the pages from the book onto that virtual whiteboard, and then shared the link with Fran, put us on a Zoom conference, recorded the Zoom conference, and we scribbled all over the book as we spoke about it and added post-it notes and whatnot. We mapped between the lines of Fran's book. You know, I had a look through the book and sort of picked up some particular areas of interest that I wanted to bring up in that interview as well, just to steer the conversation towards some of the really nuanced areas that had to do with, I guess, politics and worldviews and those sorts of things that were coming through in the book.
Okay, brilliant. So
Thank you for that. It was great.
Yeah, thanks, Tristan.
It was.
So, yeah, we thought we'd show an excerpt of that response. It's called Drawing Together Dandy Savage. So let me just find the right screen. Oh, yeah, here we go. And we'll just jump to a screen share and show an excerpt from that, and then we'll come back. Yeah, here we go.
Oh, look at this.
Have you finished it now? One of the things that always interests me is that I go on a lot of trips to really remote locations, and there's always someone there. And there's always someone where we go, and you know, we're patting ourselves in the back for going to these unexplored locations, and there's someone just chilling out there having a good time.
I'll pick up on that actually, because in this picture here, which from my personal perspective is the most potent image in the book, and you write about this image in a way that you just spoke about it there, where I think it might be here, vast concrete wasteland. I was struck then and there, for I realised my nowhere is somebody's somewhere. So
yeah.
What can you tell me more about this moment, this experience, and how you captured this image?
So we literally were on the boat and we steamed out, or dieseled out these days. It's not much of a steam thing going on, but in the sense of it, we steamed across for hours, like I can't remember, maybe 10 hours or more. To
Rebecca, I wonder if the audio and the video's not syncing.
Middle of nowhere. We weren't passing islands, we were just steaming out to sea. Yeah. And we got to this location, and the group actually surfed and I swam to shore. And I just wanted to see what was kind of going on in this place, just have a look. Like I'm sort of really curious about everything. So I sort of went walking through these bushes, this and that, and I was following a track that had been walked on before. Not, you know, when I say track, walked on by not many people whatsoever, just it was visible though. And I literally opened like this sort of bushy area and came out upon this location that you're looking at in the image. And I was really in part confused, like, well, a bit awestruck. We had been told that there was a runway on this little island. And I went walking a little bit further, and two little boys sort of looked at me like they were sort of hanging out in the nearby, looked at me and then ran away towards a house nearby. And there was only one.
Slight technical difficulty.
Oh, okay. Whoops, sorry.
I was going to say the audio's fantastic, but it was stuck on another good picture, but not the picture. that was being
Oh,
spoken
okay.
about.
Yeah, we were having some issues there as well, and I think Chris
Tristan,
brought something up as well. Should we try again?
can I suggest something?
Oh,
Can I suggest something?
Yeah.
Tristan, are you able to share the screen from your end?
Yeah, I could share the screen, but I'm not playing the video.
Do you not have the video? Does
Yeah,
anyone have the video?
yeah, I can share the original video.
Do you know at what point it needs to be picked up from?
Yeah, I
Right.
could do that. Let me have a look.
So just because it's difficult to host, manage the chat, and share a screen at the same time, sometimes you have like cross wires happening.
And the minute you click off to the chat, it'll pause the video.
It pauses the video.
Ah, is that what happened?
I think we could probably jump to the images in the gallery anyway and open up a conversation about that, and just perhaps show everyone where they can access everything in their own time if they want to.
Thanks, Roz and Chris.
Yeah, thank you.
And Tristan for that.
Yeah. No worries.
Yeah, what do you think?
Yeah, that sounds good.
Yeah, it might be. We did have some tech issues to begin with, so it might just be a tricky.
You know what's interesting? Also, just randomly, Beck picked that image as the image of the book when you first looked at the draft. You don't remember that, so I don't know if you Tristan and Beck got together and planned that, but you guys picked the same image.
No conspiracies there. Tristan, are you okay with that if we move through, or maybe we can look at that image as a still and chat about that? Yeah,
totally fine. The video's there if you want me to share. You just let me know.
Okay, all right. So I'll just escape out of that, and let's go. Let's just go back to the beginning. All right, so we'll just do a screen share from the Walls website. All right. Now I need to move that. Yeah. So welcome to our website, everyone. And just click through to the show. Yeah, so if you haven't already navigated the show, this is it on our archive. So you can actually jump into Art Space and you'll see our entire archive of exhibitions here. So feel free to surf those at another time as well. But Fran's shows at the top here. This is where we are tonight, and then you can click through for the artist book, which we'll have a look at in a minute as well. Here's Tristan's video response, and then the video tour that Jay Jemine put together we'll have a look at in a moment as well. So let's have a look through the gallery now, and Fran and Tristan as well. And if anyone has any questions, feel free to jump in. Let's have a bit of a Q&A and discussion.
These images actually, most of them aren't in the book, and they sort of they're references to give that sense of a background feeling to how the book played out and things like that. Sort of the book in itself is actually, you know, it's a, I don't want to say it's a heavy look and read, but you have to think a little bit, and this is a little bit more, I don't want to say playful, but in some ways a little bit more playful, a little bit more candid look at the experience.
Yeah. All right, so we'll flick through.
In some of the writing I reference like the things that I experienced without putting the images to match that experience. So like I've talked in the book about my hair being played with and things like that. And on this particular island, these young people had never met a Western person before. So they were just shocked at my hair. It was like, I was completely a novelty to them.
That's interesting that you say a Western person as well.
Yeah, exactly.
So this is this solo boat, the one boat that goes to this remote location. How long did it take you to get there?
You do all the hard yards, as most people do these days, via aeroplane, and you get to the closest local airport.
Yeah.
But it was 3 flights from Brisbane, and then literally, then we started boating off to various places. It's a really great operation in terms of like trying to help the guests find waves and things like that. And they've built up a lot of relationships across the islands and that sort of thing. That it just, I mean, it's giving you the distinct feeling of sort of, here we are entering this place on our big boat, and you almost feel like this could be 250 years ago, you know, a big boat turning up somewhere, and sort of all the power differences that entails, and the difference in values and culture and things like that. So
yeah, I can see the jet ski there, and there's another image where that's much more prominent. Oh, this is such a great photograph. It's so beautiful. And I guess there's a sense there too, you know, for you having been or worked in commercial photography a lot, and then to work in this much more candid and fluid way where there's not those expectations.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was, I mean, this is a first massive step away from commercial editorial surf photography work, so to speak. And it took, you know, almost 2 years to get to this point in building the book in itself and the body of work around it. But obviously, you know, you get so used to taking photos of the people you're supposed to take photos of in order to sell something. Basically, you're selling that leg rope, or you're selling that surfboard or their board shorts, and you know, you get to a stage where it's like, can you just do something that's not selling something to someone? Is it possible to, you know, to explore something beyond that? And
yeah, and I think that's really beautiful, and also with the book, the way that unfolds, and it's telling this story that's not there's no aim in that sense. It's really about a sensitivity of you, and you know, the lens is such a metaphorical thing as well, that as a commercial photographer, as you say, it's getting the money shot, whereas this, it's capturing a sensitivity, it's capturing the people and the place and a moment in time. It's not about something that's going to go into a magazine and sell 1 million leg ropes.
May not even sell a copy of the book, but you know, sometimes you just do things for yourself.
So I was trying to get my head around this, actually. It's like a big stone arch or something.
It's a big stone arch bridge, and that overexposed bit at the back is the ocean. So literally you climb up those rocks, and then that's what you're faced with. And this island is, like, fundamentally we would call in the middle of nowhere. And as I reference in the book, there's actually 2 gigantic runways on the island, and this is something that Tristan found particularly interesting, which we didn't get a chance to go over. But the American Army,
I've got that set there if you want me to press play on it.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, if you've got it teed up, let's talk a bit about that, because it is the sort of triangulation between the 3 of us and that particular image.
So you'll just have to stop sharing your screen, Rebecca.
Done.
Okay, give me a sec.
Audio.
How's that? Good?
Yeah, just no audio though. I need to...
see what was kind of going on in this place. Just look, like I'm sort of really curious about everything. So I sort of went walking through these bushes, this and that, and I was following a track that had been walked on before. Not, you know, when I say track, walked on by not many people whatsoever, just it was visible though. And I literally opened like this sort of bushy area and came out upon this location that you're looking at in the image. And I was really in part confused, like, well, a bit awestruck. We had been told that there was a runway on this little island. And I went walking a little bit further, and two little boys sort of looked at me like they were sort of hanging out in the nearby, looked at me and then ran away towards a house nearby. And there was only one house, mind you, at that place. And this man came out and he walked straight to me, and we basically engaged in a long conversation, and he relayed to me some really interesting things, namely that we were on an island that was part of the World War II campaign, Allied forces.
Wow.
And literally some critical things, and this is really pertinent to this story. The first thing he said was, World War II is still impacting us. We are still suffering from World War II. And in my mind, I was like, I don't think I've ever met anyone who's still talking about their current situation in relationship to World War II.
Yeah.
It was absolutely like a new paradigm for me. Just never even thought about that. And he relayed a story, and forgive me if I don't get everything exactly how he said it, but basically the Americans and the Allied forces showed up to their island, said they were taking it, spent a week or 10 days, constructed 2 full-size runways, used coral, they cut down mountains to get the material, because if you can imagine what it takes to build 2 full-size runways on a little island, it's not easy. And thousands of troops arrived in that period, and they used it as a launch pad to try and defeat the Japanese, who were based out of Rabaul in Papua New Guinea, and it was part of General MacArthur's campaign in World War II. So the thing that really stuck with me though was when he related it to still being impacted by World War II. He said they destroyed the topsoil of our island. Now we can't grow things. Things don't grow well here. We are really poor and we are suffering because we can't eat.
Oh my goodness.
And literally, it was really interesting. This man's name is Douglas Joseph, and he spent his career working on Manus Island for the government, if I recall correctly, and this was his home island. So he had actually retired and returned to this island at the time. And
that's a fascinating story.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Thereafter, upon hearing that, like, I didn't have internet at all on this trip. When I got back, I was straight onto Google, and you can find YouTube videos of the landings and things like that.
Yeah.
But the thing is, like,
what's
this isn't a story.
What's the name of the island again?
So I'm actually not allowed to say the names of the islands because I signed a non-disclosure agreement with the tour operators.
Okay. Wow. No way.
Interesting.
That's amazing.
Yeah. But I suspect, and they're great people. They're protecting the surf locations rather than trying to do anything to this.
That brings up a good point, actually. I might segue into that around this kind of trade and exchange and surfing destinations and surf guides and operators. And do you want me to stop?
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Tristan. It was really good to have that share. And Funnily enough, just on a personal note, my parents lived in PNG in the 70s, and my dad was a pilot, and so they spent a lot of time searching for plane wrecks in the jungles in PNG, which I have some old slides of. So it's quite incredible that these, you know, the story of that infrastructure being built, this kind of overlay and mapping and then colonisation in a sense, and then the aftermath of that of where planes would have landed or potentially been shot down and then just also left in these pristine forests. And it's interesting, Tristan, how you ask Fran the name of the island, but she can't tell you but how many US troops and military. I'm sure it's on the internet somewhere because the information would have been declassified by now.
Just go to Google Maps and look at 2 big runways of an island in Papua New Guinea. Or even as a Google search term, 2 runways, you'll probably find it.
Yeah. So, no, that was great. Thanks for sharing. So we might just go through a few more of the images as well, and then we'll flick over to the book too. Oh, I'm not on share. Hold on. Sorry, everyone. Right. The colour of the water is incredible, by the way. It's really fantastic.
It's made my life easier as a photographer.
It's amazing. Oh, what's going on? Oh, okay. Oh, I've lost the gallery. Where's it gone? Eek! Oh, okay. Not having a few. And then that would have shown up right. Oh, dear.
This is the highway, by the way. That gives reference to what we're looking at. That's, you know.
It also gives reference to the runway that, you know, this goat track, in a sense, that's made by the feet of people moving through this space, and then the runway, which is this large, or runways, these large scale operations. Yeah, there's a real opposition there. It's beautiful.
Some more just the people I met.
yeah, that's it. Oh, I love this one with the jet ski because it really shows this, you know, this juxtaposition as well.
I mean, the reality of what it's saying is the power differences haven't changed.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the, whatever viewpoint you have in life, the questionings you have, what should we value and why? I mean, that there's so many ways to look at how you move through the world.
Yeah.
But structural power imbalances continually exist, and that's like a deep product of colonialism and imperialism, things like that. So.
Yeah, so in one sense, you know, they have that tension between looking potentially like a set of holiday snaps, surf trip snaps, but there's this much deeper current and thinking and understanding in the documentation, and that's sort of unpacked in the book, which we'll jump to in a moment. There's just a couple of pictures in particular here that sort of really stand out as far as your work goes. And I know Chris and I were sort of having a bit of a chat about these. We'll try and get to those. Yeah, so can you talk a little more about these images that aren't exactly photographs taken on site? So there's a series in here that, there's a slight warp on this while it's loading. Can you talk a bit about these?
Basically, I was it's still a body of photos and work, but it's an expression of like how our value systems that we seem to place as the hierarchy of world value systems, which is in challenge as we move through the world, but how if you introduce your set of values to another place, you're basically homogenizing how people see life, how they deal with the world. And this was simply just like Liro, the young man there, on a bedside table next to a not well lit alarm clock, and the idea that you wake up in the morning, slap your alarm because you're going to work, or not these days, but it's just a function of putting to explain it briefly, it's you're putting a different culture into your own culture, and that's what I've done here basically through these images. The next one you'll see is well, it's the Weet-Bix kid, like all kids are Weet-Bix kids or something like that.
Oh no,
and,
why is it not loading? Oh. Okay,
yes,
to this next
so the Master Mariner's Legacy, talking about Cook, and you can see a Photoshop version of my cover inside that book, and some other portraits. I guess if I put the mouse over these here, you can see Gauguin's like Tahitian women there and things like that. But this it's just challenging the colonial discourse that still exists about why we believe our values are the ones that we should purport to everyone in the world. Questioning value systems, and how we force people into, I'm not saying we, but systemically, not on a day-to-day basis, like people aren't actively going, oh, I'm better than you, but just by our existence, salvation to Africa, saving Papua New Guinea, what can we actually learn from the places that are there, and actually give the necessary value to that place and person's existence just as it is, and beyond that, we have something that's superior in relaying that message of culture and values and things like that.
Yeah, and the fact that, particularly in this image, that is relayed in English and in a format that is of Western design. It's read from right to left. Absolutely. It's it's a result of the Industrial Revolution. So yeah, I feel like I keep coming back to this word undercurrent, and I guess that talks to surfing as well, but there's definitely a lot swirling around these kind of images and conversations. I'll just see if we can jump back. No, it doesn't like it. It was there for a moment, the Weet-Bix one. Oh, there we go.
Yeah, the foundation of this one is just, it's playful in terms of as a photograph. You see that as a Weet-Bix box. You see your Weet-Bix in there, and there should be nothing that stands out about that. Anyone would look at that image and it would just pass you by, other than the fact that it says PNG kids are Weet-Bix kids. Liro is the name of the person in the box instead of being Sally or Sam or whatever, and an expression of how if you place your viewpoints and values on a different culture, you're homogenizing and devaluing that existence, and that it's potentially a process that is occurring at this point in time, or continuing to occur. Say. But
I never thought I'd see a Weet-Bix box be decolonized, but well, congratulations for that.
That's great.
There you go, yeah. Oh. And then the question on that with the photoshopping, which we're not really tied in on that, but it says, are PNG kids Weet-Bix kids, question mark. Well, actually, there's no question mark, but it's more a statement. And
I like that playfulness with these. It's almost like these are you trying to understand this whole notion of where you went and what you did, which is what you talk about in the book. So trying to unpack that and create a sense of equilibrium there, I guess.
This one was fun because obviously it's, you know, if anyone's from Coolangatta area, that's the DJ Stringer sign.
Of course, I was thinking, where do I know that from?
And it's just the perfect beachfront lifestyle, a traditional wood hut, 2 bedrooms, 0 bathrooms, 0 car spots, 0 pools. But you live the dream. One of the images from the island. And yeah, it's literally just an exploration of our own values and cultures, the way our society is functioning.
Yeah.
And transferring that into
traditional wood hut.
Move in and enjoy a quaint beachside lifestyle, or knock down and build subject to council approval.
Yeah, you know, triplex. Oh, dear.
Yeah, it's just some of the reference images in the research process. Reference image too.
Quite beautiful. Right, so we might, oh, what have we got here? Oh, maybe everyone can see it. Okay, so we might...
The ultimate selfie there.
The ultimate selfie, yeah, definitely. So did you want to talk a bit about this Delbertus and that underpinning of the project?
Yeah, so Delbertus was a naturalist of Italian origin, and he was contracted by the New South Wales government to go into Papua New Guinea on boat and learn, to discover, to do things. And the reality was he gained fame because he collected the largest number of specimens, including humans, across, because Papua New Guinea was not really advancedly colonized till much later than other areas. Mm-hmm. So it was still these sorts of new, inverted commas, discoveries. But then over the years, his work was later referenced as the rape of the fly because of the way he went about it, including murdering his own crew and who knows what else would happen. But the idea was that this sense of discovery and using his books as a reference to challenge that term of discovery, challenge the viewpoint of my own viewpoint of I'm going to discover these waves, or I'm discovering new surf spots, things like that. And the reality is those places have always existed. They were someone's backyard or things like that. And the loaded term discovery, which has so many colonial connotations, as factually incorrect in so many spaces. And this book, New Guinea, What I Did and What I Saw by Luigi Delbertus, is then appropriated into my book, What I Did and What I Saw.
Yeah, and you have to wonder too, like with a book like that, if that's what's in the book, what isn't in the book, sort of what you touched on. So this is the official record. It's got the gold leaf stamped front.
And thanks to Roz and Chris for getting that out of the Queensland Library.
Shout out, Roz and Chris. Yeah, you have to wonder, that's the edited version of what happened, right? So
history is written by the victor.
That's exactly right. Yeah, the lens again. So there's these parallels again about, as artists, it's all about, well, what do we choose to show? What do we choose to share? And in this case, it's the same thing. So there's an interesting parallel there.
Dandy Savage, I used to challenge this book.
Yes.
In terms of setting new frameworks for discovery, but in the sense of discovery of self. And I was happily tearing myself apart in the book, happily referencing my shitty behavior, my arrogance at times, my stupidity, my ignorance, as well as the things that, and selfishness. There's a lot of self-commentary, and that was a challenge to this idea of how this grand explorer idea, how you construct a narrative of how you view yourself, write it in a book, and that becomes history.
Yeah.
And actually putting forward that new framework to say, actually, I'm challenging my own belief systems here and letting it go into the papers and like going into print.
Yeah.
And yeah, in that framework, it's opening the door to not romanticizing oneself as an explorer, not romanticizing or glorifying oneself as an explorer or discoverer
or a surfer, which is definitely, you know, it's like that. There's that thing about the surf was always better if you weren't there, because as surfers you're always like talking it up, or so maybe on that account we might jump to, well, I'm just going to jump to the book and have a look now. So everyone, this is the book. It's online if you haven't had a look already, and it's in PDF format, and we will, as we said, be launching a hard copy version in real life, and we can all have a big party together. Yay, that'll be exciting.
Thank you to the Queensland Government and the City of Gold Coast, which I believe I'm not just obligated, I'm very thankful to say, for funding the book, basically. As part of the Regional Arts Development Fund. So much thanks to them. But they're going to make it come into real life in hand.
Down the track. So we can all really look forward to that. So maybe as we just do this screen share and move through the book, if anyone has any questions or reflections, there was a couple of things on chat, and sorry, I've been toggling between screens and things. If anyone wanted to jump in, please, you know, feel free to do so. Just going to try and
it's just,
hey.
Oh, hi. Hello.
It's Rose and Chris.
Hi.
I may be speaking out of turn because I saw the book come to life, but I remember in the beginning stages when reading through your process, I was completely floored by your ability to be so real, yet so diplomatic, yet authentic at the same time. And I just really wanted to commend you for the body of work that you have put together, for how much that you've actually put in of yourself into this work as well. It's so evident. It has you stamped all over it, even, you know, the crossing out of words and the replacing of words and the, you know, the sort of stream of consciousness stuff that happens halfway through. It's phenomenal. It really is. And I would love to hear more about that process from you. And yeah, I think that other people who have read and will read the work will really understand you a little bit better.
Oh God. Well, thank you firstly. I appreciate that. It was a lot of work went into the creation of this book to start with, but the process, is it a terrible thing to say I sat at, oh my gosh, I can't even think. Can anyone shout out what the gallery cafe in Currumbin is called?
Dust Temple.
Dust Temple. I sat in Dust Temple every day for like 30 days writing the book. And it literally, I had just a big, like, it was all handwritten to start with, as you know, and it just, I vomited stuff from my brain onto paper, literally. So,
is that why it was in plastic pockets? That's when I saw it.
Yeah, probably.
There it is. There's the book.
Yeah, I literally printed off every image of that I took on the trip, laid it out across a room, and basically constructed the narrative I wanted to tell, and matched it to the sentiments I felt, including the dialogues I had with the people on the trip. So it was very organic in that sense. I didn't know where it was leading and what what was going to happen, to be honest. And it just ended up being glue sticked together on pieces of paper with handwriting things, and just a terribly basic process, to be honest. Very, very not complicated, but yeah, that's it.
Well, in a way.
Sorry, Rebecca, you go.
No, you go, Roz. That's fine.
No, it's always so interesting to hear how artists come up with what they've created and understanding the process, because I think it's almost that thing of like, if you know what went into making it, you appreciate the end product so much more. And I think that what I really admire about you, Fran, is that your process is unbelievably collaborative as well. Like you don't try to own it for the sake of owning it. You give what you have and you allow it to be molded based on the input that you get from people that you trust. And I think that bent towards collaboration is honestly something that we would really love to see more in the creative sector.
Yeah, I think that's something that as you get older, I think it becomes more to terms. You become more to terms with, like, you don't just have to, it's not all on your own shoulders in some ways. Like, the world isn't perfect and things aren't, you're not walking around wanting to hold up your name in front of, like, on headlights somewhere. It's just like you're trying to convey a message, trying to bring value in what you're saying. And fundamentally, the best way to do that is collaboration, in my opinion. Like, I had a foundation idea, but with Chris and yourself at Unlimited Agency, putting in that graphic work, and Christina Nisa, who's sitting over here and is hiding
out of screen at 1.5 meters away. More like 3 from me.
Who designed the cover and large parts of the book out of New York. So yeah, it is a massive collaboration, and I think that's something for all artists to take forward with them, whether in music or in painting or sculpture or whatever. You have to, everyone has so much to share and so much knowledge, and there's so much wealth of knowledge and experience in every person that exists. So why not, maximize that in how you move through the world as an artist, to be honest. Yeah,
and in a way, again, speaking of parallels, it's like this journey was something that you shared with a number of other people, and then you reflect that with the people that you met while you were there. And I think the whole process has sort of encapsulated that. It's not just about, even though it's your book, it brings into account different stories. Yeah. No. Thanks, John. Thanks, Roz. You should definitely write Fran a kick-ass reference for that next grant that she's going to apply for, because, what you said will definitely assist in that regard. Thank you. It's really good to actually talk about that process as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And if just one more thing on that process, people often ask, even though there's deep collaboration, there's also, which is quite pertinent to this point in time, there's deep thought. And I literally didn't touch my phone. Well, I mean, I had my phone to go places, do things, but I got off social media, read, like, you say some stupid number, but so many books in that space. You go into deep research mode. You just become so engrossed in what you're building that everything else doesn't matter. And I think that to produce work like this, as if I'm speaking like it's worth something, it takes so much deep thought, and I think that's useful to progress with as an artist. Like, cut the crap and, like, literally get to the deepest parts of your brain in what you're dealing with, and get rid of the world around you because it's distracting. And I think I wouldn't, like, if I was still doing things on social media or even just scrolling through social media, that those instant things distract from deep thought, in my opinion. So, like, just pawning that off, getting rid of it all, and just getting into the zone.
Yeah, I do
that's
remember.
part of the process, yeah.
Yeah, I remember you coming into the walls and you were definitely deep in that zone. It was like quite incredible. It was like you were just eating, breathing, sleeping, surfing, all these references and documents and trying to source things and find things online and from libraries and that kind of thing. So, yeah, so there's a deep sort of distillation of a lot of sources in this PDF. So it's going to be actually really wonderful to have that hard copy print version eventually, you know, something tangible that gives weight to, in a sense, everything it means and everything it stands for. Yeah.
Fran?
That's what
Chris,
the mum told me.
Yeah, Chris, yeah.
Just I'm curious about the order of things where the grant falls into your seed of the concept and the desire to move away from the commercial aspect of representation into a more deeper self-inquiry. And it's basically, did the grant come first, or did you make waves literally into that process and then see there was something growing here and then you needed funding and support from it? You talk to that a bit?
Yeah, so trying to get my thoughts clear on exactly how it happened, but fundamentally, first, Chris, thank you, because I went to your grant writing program at the Walls. That was extremely useful, and that was extremely beneficial because upon, you know, I learned a lot there, but part of that experience, other than learning the process of writing a grant, which is keep it simple, silly, basically. I wasn't really aware of what money was out there to support artists in this space at that time. Like, if you come from a commercial world, the whole point is you sell a product, you get money. But in the art space, it's you have to have an idea that's worthy of something to get the money, so to speak, or whatever, write a good grant. But so upon learning that there was possible to pursue a grant to actually make it happen, it sort of stayed to the side of my mind, knowing that that could exist. But I genuinely think I just wanted to push out a new viewpoint with my photography, and it sort of serendipitously came together, thinking, okay, well, this is something that I could apply for with Germinate grant at Gold Coast City Council and Queensland Government. So yeah, in that sense, I guess I would suggest for all artists, you know, if to pursue that grant process, it's definitely worthwhile, because it fundamentally meant I was able to do a project solely based on what I was thinking. It had nothing else other than what I wanted to present to the world, basically. And it's extremely liberating to know that there's a group of, or there's funding available for that, I think. So, yeah. Yeah,
and I think you'd already sort of made a considerable investment in the project too. Yeah, that's right. In some ways. So, but yeah, it's a good question. Definitely that sort of transitioning across, and it's a completely different model to working in a commercial way.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the book looks so good. It really looks beautiful, even on the screen. So
thank you.
It's so cool to see it as a hard copy book.
Yeah.
I just got another question in relationship to how you've treated this exhibition in quite an interesting, and I'll almost say strategically, personally valuable way, that you've supported the book, the strong images that are in the book, you know, the ones that have been highly considered over a long period of time, with these contextually interesting images on the Walls website, and approached a more conceptual approach, and particularly the last few images, and you're sort of playing those two quite personal experiences that you've had off for us to see it in different ways. And maybe to prompt you, how would have you treated the walls if it was a physical show? Would it have been in a similar way?
Well, I actually had a full installation planned in my mind for what I was going to present. And basically, I'd even started procuring items for it. I was in the workshop sanding things away, things like that. And literally, what can I say, the pandemic blew up and it became apparent that I wouldn't be able to do an installation. But with deep empathy and respect to the critical situation that's going on, and a lot of people have been impacted all across the world. People's lives have been affected and people have lost work. So respectfully, it is a difficult time for a lot of people. So I just did, for me, it was an easy transition, like just make the best of the situation. And the reality is the book existed as a PDF and it was a perfect synergy to be able to showcase it online. Creating the supporting material obviously was an after effect to that. But it's literally, if this was going to be shown in the walls, I would probably still have pursued the installation, even it would have been
a lot about it.
Yeah, so yeah, and it would have been structured not necessarily around showcasing the images of the book in themselves, but showcasing the concept more so than just an actual suite of images. So yeah, that's how I'd say.
Yeah, we've got that to look forward to. Well, not the installation, but the book.
Yeah,
book launch. Right. Okay, so I think probably around 7 o'clock. We thought we might have a bit of a break if anyone wanted to stay around. We've got a really great slideshow sound work that local artist and friend of Fran's has put together. So we thought we'd share that.
Maybe we should just run through it.
Yeah.
Jay Jermaine created this soundscape, and so thanks to Jay for that. And it explores the through sound part of the journey, and these are more unpublished images. Not all of them appear in the book, which is great to have more reference points to that experience, but the soundscape explores that sense of, if you see the chapters, there's actually no pages listed to the chapters. It's more a conceptual idea of the feeling of this unexplored land, which of course is contrary to the idea of the unexplored and discovered sense, just to point that out. And then that impact of moving with the boats moving into the scene and things like that. Yeah.
Okay, we'll hit play.
Thanks, Jay, for that.
Thanks, Jay, for that. We're back, everyone. Alrighty. Well, does anyone have any questions, Q&A for Fran or the walls?
Yeah, I've got a question. Fran, that was really beautiful. Thank you. Some awesome images there. And I wore my top specifically to match the water in your photos.
Amazing.
So really appreciate that epic blue. But yeah, I was wondering what the reaction from local residents was to your project in general, and how like keen and enthusiastic they were to be part of it and profiled. And you know, because you've got that narrative around the airstrip as well, and you know, if that story was to be elevated, or any of the stories, I guess, that you've kind of collected, what was the general response?
Well, speaking directly from Douglin, who is the gentleman in that image on the runway, he fundamentally said, tell this story to everyone. We need people to know we're here. And it was an overwhelming sense of basically giving voice to a place that didn't have a voice. But, you know, and that's constructed by our viewpoints of the world, so to speak, in that, you know, we haven't gone back there. You know, he pointed out how they basically built these things in World War II and then left the country, and that was it. Nothing existed thereafter. So the response was always quite positive. Up front, anyone who said they didn't want to be photographed wasn't ever photographed, things like that. It was always a level of that, when not just a level of that, explicitly as a photographer, when you're building stories like this or any other story, there's a complete degree of respect that you give on any level. You know, it's not glorifying you know, it's not glorifying people or a story or constructing a romantic narrative of how I view what's going on. There's an explicit expression of agreement or disagreement to what's going on, and that's how the story's formed, more or less. So in expression to the book, because it's a lot more of a personal journey, I'm not actually sure what, you know, these islands are so extremely remote. I haven't had a chance to go back. We're places.
Yeah, I was going to ask as well, like, will you be showing them the work back and how, you know, continuing that narrative?
Absolutely. I would endeavour to go back there. The costs of going there are so extreme. It's in the, you know, it's almost 10,000 Australian dollars, including, you know, the boat and the travel there. So it's quite prohibitive, but absolutely endeavour to go back with the book to engage again in a further conversation about what's going on since then. But you know, I suspect that the people will have grown older. The situation may be very similar. When I arrive back, there may be very few differences, to be honest. But you know, and no commentary on what that means. Just it'll be interesting to see. Just keep an open mind to it.
Do you want to tell this? This is Christina, by the way.
Christina. Christina helped design the book. She's trying to social distance. I'll get out of the frame.
Oh, no. I just wanted Fran to tell the story of the cover image and Grace, who's the girl on the cover image, and your relationship with her.
Grace was an exceptional young woman, in my opinion. We met in the water in one of these islands, and she was amongst a group of young people surfing and swimming. Not surfing, swimming with palm leaves, which is equivalent of surfing in some respects. And the next day she swam out in a thunderstorm, torrential rain, and greeted me out in the water by herself. She's 10 years old, and just hung around and swam with me as I surfed in the water, basically. And we started playing, diving under waves, going back and forth with each other, genuinely in my sense, genuinely connecting over the ocean and surfing. And I chose Grace as the cover image because to me it was a fundamental new framework that I wanted to showcase a young Papua New Guinean girl in the ocean as a powerful force, fists clenched as she powered through a wave. And the reality is a 10-year-old Papua New Guinean girl is never been showcased as a lead in a surf book or magazine or anything of that sort. And part of Dandy Savage is setting new frameworks for how we view the world around us, and not sticking to, you know, just exploring why, you know, as I've said, exploring why do we think the things we think. And part of that is because what we are projected through media, those sorts of things. So this is my opportunity as a person in the surf industry, as an artist, to showcase new frameworks that have just genuinely, people that have been ignored, things like that, who, you know, that's the experience of global travel, is that you meet people and you learn so much, and everyone has so much to bring to the table at every single level, whether it's a 10-year-old girl who's swimming out in a thunderstorm to greet you by herself, and or anyone else, and giving the floor to that young girl, basically. Yeah. That's it. Yeah.
I guess I brought that up just because we've had conversations, and I think you must found some sort of like soul connection with that young girl. So you just almost like embodied you as a young woman, kind of struggling to find her place in a world that wasn't really dominated or embodied by
I wish I was
women.
saying what you're saying. Yeah, absolutely.
So I think that, to me, that image is really powerful too, because like you're saying, it changes the archetype of what power is, or like what type of people are being seen.
Yeah,
And, like,
absolutely.
the gesture and the way you photographed her and the composition, like breaking through, it's really beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, that I would recreate everything you just said.
That's why I'm here to help.
Yeah.
Bring up the points. Yeah, we've
Yeah.
already talked about.
Absolutely, and that's the point. As a young woman who grew up in surfing, 24, 25 years ago, you weren't seen. You were seen how someone told you to be seen. You were shown, you were portrayed how someone else chose to portray you, and your actual essence was never truly given any space to come out and to express oneself. And that's how I felt growing up, to be honest. I shouldn't even say I felt that growing up. I didn't know that was forced upon me. As an older person, I reflected that had happened to me, that I had undergone those experiences of suppression, oppression, all sorts of things like that. And it's only through age recognizing that how that's impacted me in my life. So grace is a statement. Grace is a statement that of not accepting that position, not accepting not accepting that only some people get the stage and a voice. And that's the statement. That's that. Yeah.
Challenging that position.
Yeah, challenging that position. Yeah.
Did you have any other points to point out?
No,
Christina? No, that's okay. I guess, did anyone else have any, I'll just be the voice, the narrator. Did anybody, was there any other points for conversation or images that anyone wanted to touch on or perhaps ask Fran about? Yeah.
Hi, Fran.
I'll jump in. Oh, sorry, there's a couple.
Oh, sorry. Fran, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the way, the way context matters when you are documenting something like this for you as a photographer, particularly when you're exploring ideas such as colonialism, and as somebody that's documenting that, how your context and your identity plays into the way that what you choose to shoot and how you choose to exhibit it.
Yeah, there's a lot of thought and deep processes into context, and in part just relaying back to the previous point, when I was brought up in essence a white Australia, there's a lot of what I was taught were the right ways to be, the right ways to think, and that influenced me as a young person in terms of how I saw the world. And through experience and seeing, being faced with different people's different realities, that sort of prompted me into how I moved about taking photos. And in part, and in a large part, Dandy Savage as a book and as an exhibition is about presenting new frameworks that I felt it's hard to express exactly, but in a way there's things that I felt I couldn't showcase before because some part of my brain somewhere in there felt like those things were not the right things to show. And that part of the book is in questioning what is that little voice there, what is right and wrong to show, and trying to deconstruct what that actual message is. And that relays into the photographs coming out and how I place them in the context of the book, and how I frame them as in person, so to speak. So it's about giving space as a photographer, as myself, in feeling comfortable showing any image, showing anything I want to show, and recognizing that has inherent value beyond this little voice that's like, that's the wrong thing to show, or that's the right thing to show. It's right and wrong, you know, arguably, you know, moral philosophical questions. But yeah, so in that respect, I just took photos of anything I wanted to, and didn't want to have anything hold me back in that sense. And in respect, you'll see within the book, as a surf exploration, the images don't, there's only one photo of surfing in the whole book. Like that's basically suggestive of that going beyond just surfing in that exploration is how I could frame a surf book, rather than, you know, here's 50 action surf photos or whatever, just feeling that space to be able to do anything. I feel like I'm blabbering a lot, sorry.
No, not at all, it's great.
There's so much in my brain thinking. Yeah.
Thanks, Fran. Awesome.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for the question. I think there was another question nearby.
It was me, and it's interesting, Lucy's question, because mine was actually going to be on a similar line. And I guess I just want to start by saying thank you for this wonderful opportunity to have a glimpse into your work, and thanks for taking us traveling tonight to Papua New Guinea. It's certainly been somewhere that I have wanted to go for a long time, and you've increased my appetite to go and explore and experience some of the really special things that you obviously have been privileged to. And I just, again, like you've just commented, I love that this is a collection that touches on so many things, whether it's, a little bit of surfing, the travel, the history, you know, past and present. And I really love this idea around colonialism that you're bringing up and bringing to the front of this space. And I spent some time living and working in West Africa in a former British colony as well. And I used to be constantly challenged by, you know, going into remote villages where, you know, people didn't have water, didn't have electricity, yet they aspired to wear Western clothes, and they aspired to, you know, leave the village and all of these things. And I remember teaching, I'm a dietitian, I was teaching nutrition at a university, and, you know, they aspire to eat the food that they think Western people eat. And it was around, I spent a lot of time debunking these ideas and trying to convince them to eat their own local foods, which were more nutritious, cheaper, more readily available, but they wanted the things in the packets. And I just, you know, would shake my head at these, I guess, juxtapositions that I was being faced with. And so I guess I'd love to hear if you had any comments around your experience from a local perspective in Papua New Guinea.
Yep.
Of, you know, was there a similar aspiration to eat wheat bix, you know, to, I saw, you know, the clothing that they're wearing, things like that. I'd just love to hear what your experience was like. And then, you know, further, why is there this lasting impact in these countries that, you know, how do we have this lasting impact, and how can we continue to convince them that actually their way is really awesome and wholesome? And yeah, so just any comments around that, I'd be interested to hear. Sorry, now I've gone on a rant, but yeah.
Well, part of Dandy Savage is about not convincing anyone of anything. It's about looking within to find a sense of self and understanding why we believe that that's even what we would be convincing someone of, so to speak. So Papua New Guinea is an interesting case because it's had multiple colonial powers in different regions of the country, including Australia through the 70s, Germany. So it has like really diverse sort of colonial impact. But it's really, I did have those experiences where I did stop and look at some actions, like the wanting to, like in Port Moresby, for example, that, you know, the chasing of capitalism, the chasing of new highways, things like that. And part of the important message of Dandy Savage is stepping back and going, everyone has a right to the space to exist, to come up with their own points of view of the world. Everyone has a right to exist in a space where no one should really be saying this is the right way to move ahead, whether that's highways or high rises or staying local and eating the local food, even though if you could see that that's probably, you would believe it's the more nutritious option or things like that. Dandy Savage is about going, why am I even thinking that that message needs to be portrayed to a different group of people, and giving a sense of power to those people that the choices they're making for themselves are inherently valuable, whatever that choice is. Giving that space to say, if you want to have Western food, have Western food. If you want to have local food, have local food. But in a sense of understanding why, why you would want to do that comes down to that person in respect, and then taking yourself out of the picture and going, why am I thinking this needs to be like a message sent to someone else? And I guess if you look at the project as a whole, understanding oneself allows a person to step back and go, well, if I can understand myself, anyone can understand themselves, I guess, in part. But in terms of like experiencing, the lack of water, the lack of food and things like that, the aspiration to Western living, as an outsider, I sort of go, yeah, it does look in some ways concerning, but why am I concerned? That's what Dandy Savage is about. Why am I concerned about fundamentally why do I have that concern, and deconstructing that concern in respect to that. So yeah, I shared a lot of similar experiences, and in terms of your experiences in West Africa, really opening the door beyond sort of going that there's a right way of living and a wrong way of living, so to speak, and going everyone sort of deconstructing their own viewpoints of the world in some ways. Yeah, I really am blabbering. No,
it's great. Thank you for sharing.
No, and thanks for sharing your experience too. That was awesome.
Anytime. It's my favorite thing to talk about.
Anyone else? And I'm ready to blabber.
I have a question.
Okay.
Where does, now that we started this,
because we can't see you on screen here.
I guess in conversations here, does this feels like a kickoff of a larger body of work. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. Fundamentally, like I've basically got years of photographs that haven't been published or shown, and on a process level, they're being turned into projects. But it is an ongoing deep exploration of my existence as a Korean Australian person and woman, and my place in the world, basically, and using basically art. And that's why I'm really thankful to the walls, giving artists so many spaces, a space to be able to just present anything they want in terms of expression of self and things like that. So thanks for that. That's why the walls is amazing in that respect. But yeah, so yeah, it's really just exploring why and how I exist on a really fundamental level. That sounds really egotistical, but
I guess what impact do you hope your work will have?
Yeah, it's similar to how I expressed before. My goal is that any person of any race, any gender, any identity feels comfortable, like through seeing my work, to have a space in which they can then present their story, express themselves in the world, their existence, what they think, what they feel, to try and like give the floor to anybody really, and in part those who haven't particularly had a voice And yeah, that's absolutely my fundamental underlying goal with all the bodies of work that I'm moving forward with, because all of those things that we're told are buzzwords, like the patriarchy and feminism and things like that, you know, those things are all deeply ingrained into our social setups, so to speak. And I definitively believe there are people that have not been given a voice, and I definitively believe there is value in every voice. So all my projects moving forward are setting a standard for a new framework where any voice can be heard. Yeah, that's all. You know, try and change the world or something, if the world wants to be changed.
So, Fran, just on that topic of voice, because, you know, it's oral and we're talking about images, what's the process for translating that voice into images? Like, how do you get into that zone or that space? And you were talking a lot about grace, and it sounded like, you know, you developed this relationship. Can you talk a bit about that, what it takes to sort of get to that point where you feel like you can be representative of someone's voice through your lens and your images?
Well, I mean, on a really fundamental level, it's about just challenging that little voice in your head, which is for me is, you know, 33 years of constructed ideas, and saying, oh, maybe there's a different pathway outside of that. But you know, getting to, how could I express that? I always could go on.
Is it intuitive, or is
I'd say intuitive? I'm going to say it's not intuitive in the sense of you actually have to fight against a lot of the narratives. I've had to fight, shouldn't be speaking for other people, I've had to fight against the narratives and the constructed narratives that are in my mind, because they're so pervasive and they've existed in such a magnitude of spaces and places that I've questioned the things I believe in fundamentally, just because of the worlds I've visited, the places I've seen, the people I've met. So part of that is like going, is my intuition actually real? I question at times whether like the intuition is actually the belief system that has been made for me. So in part it's about, you know, I take a photo or meet someone and probably think more than I should about every experience or encounter. But definitely, like, I would say it's challenging that inherent intuition. I mean, it's maybe there's trying to uncover what might be a genuine intuition and what's just
a subconscious framework. It sounds like that, literally. Yeah, is part of the fabric of who you've been told you are, in a sense, absolutely, by the Western world. That completely. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. And I think also too, not only that, but in a sense, coming from a commercial photography background, you can't exist on intuition, right? You're not, you know, that space of that romantic or the idea of the artist. I mean, really, it's proven that for creativity to unfold, you have to be able to drift. You have to have time to just let things happen and float around. But I guess in a sense, you've worked as a commercial photographer, so you're used to sort of delivering on a brief, and that's then part of your framework as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, okay. So interesting. So many insights. I feel like we've been just mining you for information.
There's still more to go, but don't tell anyone. Any other questions?
Yeah, we're getting
there.
We're getting near time. Yeah, was there any other questions or reflections? I'm just squeezing because I feel like I'm just this weird narrating voice. Hello, welcome to the waltz.
I just also just want to say thanks to everyone for tuning in to Zoom. Really appreciate that. Like, you know, supporting the walls, supporting local artists, all sorts of things like that. I shouldn't say things like that, but
yeah, and responding
really
to the work, some
yeah.
really great questions. It's so awesome to.
It's a highlight of, you know, the intelligence and thoughtfulness and all of those wonderful traits that exist amongst our community, and excited that there's so many wonderful people that can actually, you know, present those things, their viewpoint to the world too, you know, here and in general. So there's so much value that everyone has and shares. So
definitely.
Yeah, I appreciate that on a fundamental level, day to day. So beyond this as well. So.
Yeah, and I think as an artist too, it's not you know, it's that great opportunity to for the audience to have a direct line to you, but also for you to talk back to the work and be reflective after all the hard work's done, you know. So that's a really great thing as well. And then that, you know, talking about new bodies of work, you sort of carry all of those sentiments and reflections into new work as well. I probably should mention too, there's a couple of other public programs coming up for Fran's show. We're having a casual convo next Sunday, which is sort of stems from Surf Salon, which was a show that we started at the Walls a couple of years ago, and Fran was part of a big group show, Salon Hang Show at the Walls, that we ran for the last couple of years. So there's a group of us, we sort of go by the ABC, which is the Artist Board Writers Club. We're just having a casual convo, so if anyone wants to drop in and join for a cup of tea next Sunday, grab a coffee and log on, and we'll just be talking making waves in the art world, riding waves, and talking about contemporary art and what it is to be an artist, and I guess, and a surfer, and to be living and working in this place called the Gold Coast. And then following that, we're starting a new program, which Mindy Davies is here. She's curating and hosting for us, called Last Sundays, and that's happening on the last Sundays of our exhibition. So at the moment, all these programs are running online. Hopefully we'll get to do something in real life soon, but the Oogers are going to be doing a live set from 4 p.m, Mindy, or 5 p.m. Sunday the 24th.
Sunday the 24th.
So basically, Mindy's invited the band to respond to Fran's show, and they'll be doing a live stream lounge room set to celebrate the end of the show. So the bookends of the show. Yeah, it's really exciting. It's been a fun testing ground, all this online stuff as well. Yeah. Did you want to add anything else, Fran?
I think I've spoken enough. Thanks Beck. Thanks Chris. Thanks to everyone involved at the Walls. I mean, I've got a thank you list that's really long, and which can be seen at the last page of the book. So I'd rather just leave it at that. But appreciate everyone showing up and zooming in, and I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Fran. It's been a pleasure, and we've got that book to look forward to. I think the wonderful thing about being online is that having guests come in from the Netherlands tonight that ordinarily couldn't join us in our White Cube space, which I went and visited yesterday on my own, and I felt a little like, I miss these white walls, and I miss everyone in that space with the art. So
we're back soon enough.
Yeah, we'll be back soon. Yeah. Oh well, might be a wrap.
I'm gonna do a wave.
Yeah.
Bye. Thanks everyone. Take care. Have a good night.
Thank you all so much for joining.